Well, good morning, everyone. Looks like it's about time to start. I have a happy announcement to start us off with this morning. I think that I was able to add everyone who was on the wait list and who was attending and who was here on Thursday. So we should be okay. I'm not sure that Telebears is very fast. You know, it's only a computer, so it doesn't catch up on this kind of thing very quickly. But if you have been attending and you were here last time and you were on the wait list, I think that you've been added. So check with that and check with me afterwards if you have any questions about that. Also, if you have a couple of spare hours a week and you want to do something nonviolent with those couple of spare hours, we're starting to develop a lot of projects at the Meta Center, and we need a lot of help over there. So I guess for starters, if you just come and mention it to me after class, and I'll see how many of you are interested in what we can do in having a long meeting with the staff today. That sounds very grand, but actually it's 2 people I'm taking out for lunch. But just a few more announcements before we get started. I heard about a very interesting piece of scientific evidence on Tuesday. If you remember, there was a certain point in PAX 164A where we sort of ran through the scientific evidence for the potential of a human being to be nonviolent and affect others. And I heard about a very interesting finding, which at first I didn't know what to do with, but when I thought about it later, I thought it is indeed very significant. And the finding is this: they were studying Buddhist monks who were being asked to do what they call metta practice. Metta being originally the Buddhist term for loving kindness. So what they're doing is they're generating compassionate feelings in themselves. I don't know exactly how they do this, but they bring up compassion. And while these monks are sitting there being compassionate, their brains are being scanned with this very sophisticated MRI technology to see what part of the brain would light up. And it's very interesting. As I say, it took me a while to realize how significant this actually is. Surprisingly, the part of the brain that is activated when you're having compassionate thoughts towards persons or towards institutions, that's a lot harder, but say towards persons who need our compassion. The part of the brain that gets activated is the motor area of the brain, the part that would drive you into action. So I thought there's something very intriguing about that, and later I realized what this probably actually means is that I'm going to use an expression now which I'm going to go back and modify in a little bit. We are hardwired to act out of compassion. In other words, we are physiologically set up so that the more compassionate we feel, the more our brains are ready to drive us into action, and that has obvious survival benefits, not only for the group as a whole, but for the person or creature acting out of positive motivations. You see what happens when you act out of negative motivations that's going on in Iraq right now. So I said we're hardwired to behave in this way. Scientists, the more scientific scientists, hipper scientists today are not claiming that when there's a physical pathway, that is what determines our behavior, but rather somehow they use the term mediated. When you have compassion, you want to act out of that compassion. This is being mediated through brain structures and through circuitry that has been connected up in the brain. So we're not saying that this is physically caused, but we are saying that there are 2 basic objections that you'll meet with when you try to develop a nonviolent position with somebody. The first one they'll probably say is it never would have worked against Hitler. By now you should be able to deal with that issue. And the second one they'll say is that it's not human nature. So what we're getting now is just more and more evidence coming in from every conceivable angle that in fact nature, and especially human nature, are organized precisely for nonviolence. I mentioned the famous Dutch primatologist Frans de Waal last semester. He is sort of leading off a lot of that research. Okay, now we're still going through the announcements. Okay, we haven't gotten to the course yet. Trivia quiz. Nonviolence trivia quiz of the week. I don't have any special t-shirt on today, so I've got to, I'm reduced to this sort of thing. It turns out that yesterday in AD 41 was the day that the Roman Emperor Caligula was assassinated. Now, why is that significant? Do you remember how I'm talking to the people who took PAX 164A or who read my book with the attention that it deserves? Why is the career of Caligula and the way that it ended significant in the nonviolence story? Does anybody remember that? Not that he was a nonviolent person, right? He's like your quintessential bad emperor. Mike? Right. Caligula is the one who ordered a statue of himself as Zeus to be put up where? In the temple in Jerusalem. Yeah, that's what's important. So this was a classic example of a dictatorial person trampling on the sensibilities of people that he had no, that he just didn't have any sensitivity to. And if you remember my saying that Johann Galtung, after much research, came to the conclusion that the problem in the Middle East is that we want access to their oil reserves and they want respect for their religion. So the clash of civilizations is actually a clash of egos, and it would be very, very easy to resolve it if we didn't have those egos and we had some respect for what's important to them. But we don't have it. So this is another, this has been going on forever. And in AD 40, this is what happened. Caligula wanted a statue of himself put up in the temple in Jerusalem. The Jews came flocking into the city from every corner, especially of Galilee. Most of the big troublemakers came from Galilee, sort of the Berkeley of ancient Palestine. And they said, you can't do this. And Caligula ordered the Syrian legate, who was in charge of military control of Jerusalem, his name was Petronius. He ordered him to put this down. And Petronius said, we will kill you. And the Jews just lay down and said, go ahead and kill us. So this is, what stage are we at here, folks? Stage 3, right? You see it right here, if you look really carefully. Stage 3, once again, people en masse, this time not an individual, willing to lay down their life, and it turns out that in this particular case, they did not have to lose their life. Petronius didn't know how to handle this. He had incidentally slaughtered lots of Jews who were resisting in the ordinary fashion, but this was something that he didn't know how to cope with. Do you remember Bill Sutherland's little story from Danville State Prison, where the warden comes in and sits down and he says, you guys are driving me crazy. I don't know how to handle nonviolent resistance, Very, very important revelation. So anyway, Petronius sent a letter to, they didn't have email yet, if you remember that. He sent a letter to Caligula saying, maybe this isn't such a good idea because we'd rather have these people out in the fields harvesting crops so we can exploit them rather than just have their blood running in the streets of Jerusalem. And Caligula immediately ordered Petronius to commit suicide. He posted that letter, and Caligula was assassinated before the letter reached Petronius. So that's the whole story, and the way it fits into the whole history thing. There are some seats on the other side if you want to go around the back. Yeah. The way this fits in, yeah, there's one here, but I didn't want to walk in front of the camera. Thanks, Joanna. The way this fits in is that, in fact, there were about 7 uprisings in the ancient Jewish world. About 5 of them were sort of nonviolent, and of those 3 were successful, and 2 broke down, and I think 3 were successful, 1 broke down, and 1 was mooted by a change in the issue became irrelevant. But it shows you that nonviolence has been around for a long time, even though there have not been courses in it until relatively recently, and that does make some sort of difference. Okay, So now what I'd like to do today is talk some more about the film that we just saw, and then finally get around to analyzing in some depth this very brief account we have of the 1944 insurrection in El Salvador and the other things that it led to, and that'll be a very good segue for us to next week's topic. Next week we really get into the heaviest kind of nonviolent uprising or activity, which is insurrection, which actually aims at overthrowing a government. Not by constitutional means like the impeachment campaign that's going on, but by whatever it takes. So I just wanted to start us off by sharing with you that when this film was premiered, this documentary, The Good War and Those Who Refuse to Fight It, Bullfrog Films, for those of you who want to tell your folks about it back home, when it premiered in Oakland, it was very dramatic. I was invited to be on a panel discussing conscientious objection and nonviolence and the like, and I said my usual stuff, yada, yada, Gandhi, so my usual. And it went on, and people had very interesting questions, and then these two older people guys got up in the back of the room and said, aren't you going to talk about us? And so we said, well, who are you gentlemen? And they said, we were in Camp 14, the selective service camp, so they got the innovation of their life. There was not a dry eye in the house when that was over. And you can sort of see, these guys had made that sacrifice 60 years ago, and finally they were getting some due recognition for it. So this was very, very emotional. So that's part of the reason that I started showing this film. Let me review, as I recall them, some of the key points that came up that we were discussing last time, and we'll go on from there. I think that in a way what I'm about to mention is, and that we did talk about, is fundamental, absolutely fundamental. As you know, I believe that principled nonviolence, the kind that we're talking about here, I was going to put PNV on the t-shirt, but that would kind of mess it up visually, so we just stuck with NV. Principled nonviolence is the kind that begins from a spiritual struggle within the individual, and sometimes is best described as a struggle against negative drives. And we were putting side by side this very dramatic episode that David Dellinger described himself going through in that prison. Prison is a fairly good place to go through spiritual conversions. It's also a good place to waste your whole life without going through anything. And I know because I've got a couple of people who found my book in there and I'm in correspondence with them. But there's also the story of Ammon Hennessy, who was an anarchist in World War I, and in prison they put him in this jail cell with nothing but the gospel, so out of sheer boredom he started reading it, and he had this revelation that if he was going to be a true anarchist and really come out of the violent framework of society, he was going to have to love the warden, who was the person whom he most hated in the entire world at that moment. The warden had actually cheated him, told him he was going to be sprung, and then said, haha, we were just kidding you. So I mean, this guy was vicious and arbitrary, capricious, cruel, all these good Boy Scout virtues. And Hennessy describes, you'll never forget, he's walking back and forth in the cell, and he walked into the wall. It was such a revelation. He realized he had to overcome his hatred of that person, not just of mankind in general. So similarly, David Dellinger comes to the realization that he's not going to change his values, he's not going to change his position. Therefore, he's looking at a whole life of prison. He's going to be in trouble his whole life, which basically he was. I'm sorry to say he passed away a few years ago. And he, I guess, asked himself this very deep question, are you willing to go through with this? Are you okay with it? And he said yes, and the minute he was okay with it and let go of it, some new capacities, some new powers came into his disposal. So it's this kind of personal conversion that really lies at the heart of nonviolence, though we are going to talk a fair amount about how you build it out, how you make a movement out of it, what's been going on with them, and so forth. But my belief is that without this kind of personal change, that there isn't really anything there to work with. The rest is just tricks and structures. As Johann Galtung said to me one time, I love dropping names of famous people. And so there I was talking to Maria Shriver, and I said, could I borrow your husband's motorcycle? As Johann Galtung said to me one time, unless you have some belief, some sort of deep change design inside yourself, your nonviolence is just a set of tricks. And guess what? The other side has better tricks. So eventually you're going to lose on every level if you don't have it. If you've got that, it won't happen by itself, but you can figure out how to build that out into a movement and into institutions and into a new world order, which is nothing more nor less than what we're aiming at here. Okay. All right, and then let me start us off with a question then. I thought it was way cool that they let them out to pitch softball when they had all been locked away in punishment camps, and it even says something significant. Can you see what is so special about baseball that here you have these people who were condemned for basically betraying their allegiance to the country, they're locked away in prison, they're treated as criminals, but baseball is a different matter. Why? It's just a slightly cynical question I'm asking here. What do you think? Let me put it this way. What do you think baseball and war have in common that you might kind of weigh them one against the other? Matthias? Yeah.
Has the capacity to create heroes.
Yeah.
There's the same one for another, and victory and strategic gains.
Yes, especially in all the things that you mentioned, your camaraderie. What was the first thing you said, Matthias? I don't remember anymore. But the victory part, yeah, sorry? Power struggle, victory, maybe the single term that would embrace it, that would actually get warfare and sports on roughly the same page, is competition. It's negative struggle. It's the belief that relationships are win-lose, and therefore the way to work out the order in the world, which is supposed to be there, is by a big cockfight, pitting everybody against everybody else, and the person who wins was the one who was destined to win. And that's why, pardon my bitterness here, but when you're going into the presidential election of 2000, and just 2 weeks before the election, Senator McCain was ahead of the other guy, 4-letter name, and the other guy's team played a dirty trick where they made a nationwide advertising campaign saying that McCain had done something really quite reprehensible. It was discovered after 5 days that this was a complete lie, no basis in truth. Guess what? It didn't matter. The point was that he knew enough dirty tricks to win, not that whether the other person actually was this bad or was not this bad. So this is, let's take a moment now to turn off our cell phones. So, mind you, a nonviolent person does not have to say, I will never play baseball. Baseball is not itself violent, but it can be approached in such a way that, unless you get beamed with a hard boil, that's pretty hard. But it can be approached in such a way where the key element is the competition. And then what you have is you just have this swinging back and forth between symbolic competition, which is baseball, and outright competition, which is shock and awe, bombing people. But that also is not ultimately grounded in reality, but that's another topic. Matt?
One thing that was interesting about the context of the film was that the pitcher, when he released to play the game,
yes.
all the others were.
Yes.
And so that was like
yeah.
almost putting himself in a position
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, remember that. They wanted to just let this one pitcher out so they could win their game, and he said, oh, you want me out? Well, then let's bargain. I'm not leaving unless all my buddies leave. Yeah. My brother, just wax a little bit personal here, the government, the U.S. government took an unhealthy interest in my brother in the 1970s. They wanted to send him to a South Asian country. He went to a North American country instead. But my brother was a famous folk singer. Perhaps if any of you are from Canada, you've heard of Eric Nagler. He's very famous up there. His brothers failed to make it in the U.S., but he at least made it in Canada. And so it comes one Thanksgiving, and Eric was part of a group called the Beers family, and they were quintessentially American. And so Pat Nixon invited the Beers family to play at the White House one Thanksgiving, not realizing that the lead guitarist for the Beers family is languishing up in Canada because he's a conscientious objector. So they wrote him and said they'd let him come down to play at the White House and then go back to Canada. So he writes to me, I'm his older brother, I still don't have email, so he wrote or phoned and said, what should I do? I said, agree to come down if they will let all the COs who are up in Canada come down and visit their families for Thanksgiving and go back. I think that was exactly the right thing to do. It did not turn out exactly that way. There were also some further very funny developments which we'll talk about at some point. But maybe this is a good opportunity for me to share with you one of my favorite Jataka stories. I think this is actually useful, and we will be able to cover what we want to cover, even if I have this slight digression. A Jataka story is a story about the Buddha in his earlier incarnations. And this particular story is called The King of the Deer. Any Buddhists in the class are familiar with this story? It's a very good story. If you have children or planning to have children, want to raise them non-violently, this is a good story to tell them. Okay, it turns out there was a king who liked venison, deer meat, and so he organized these huge hunting expeditions. He went out and slaughtered deer every time he felt like it, and it was getting to be unecological, and maybe the time was coming where they were an endangered species, and so they struck a deal with the king that if he would not hunt them in this cruel way, they would send one deer, I think each day or something, to the royal palace that he could use for his royal feast. So he said, okay, I can live with this. So every day one deer, they draw lots, and one deer would go. So the king of the deer is walking around his domains one day, and there's a pregnant doe who is weeping. And the king of the deer says to her, what's the matter? My dear? Sorry, I couldn't resist that. We'll try to get from grade C up to sort of grade B plus level. But what's the matter? And she said, today is my turn, and it's not my life, but it's the life of my little fawns that I'm so upset about. And the king said, never fear, you stay here, I will go in your place. So the king of the deer goes and lays his head on the chopping block in the royal kitchen, and the cook comes out and just says, whoa, I can't kill the king. There's a big tradition in India, you don't kill kings. I have a problem here. So he goes back, and eventually he has to go all the way up to the top and get the Maharaja to come down and talk to this king, the deer king who's laying there with his head on the block. And the human king says to the deer king, we're both kings. We're in this together, kingy old boy. So I don't want to kill you. That wouldn't be right. I'll let you go. I'll be vegetarian today. And the deer king doesn't get up. And so the human king says, well, maybe you didn't hear me. And would translate this, please, into deer language. I don't want to kill you. And he said, I'm not leaving here until you stop taking all of us. That you promise you will never kill another deer, otherwise I'm staying here on this block. And the human king says, whoa, that's pretty heavy to renounce venison. The rest of my life is not a very kingly thing to do. He says, but I have no choice, really. Of course, I can't kill him, and he won't go away. So I'm forced. He says, okay, I won't kill you and you deer anymore. And he still doesn't get up. And the king says, now what's your problem? And he says, I'm not leaving until you agree that you'll never kill another animal. And the king agrees. And of course, that king of the deer was the Buddha in an earlier incarnation. That's how the story ends. Now, I'm not saying this actually happened. Okay, most of the other anecdotes and episodes we'll be talking about are historical in the normal sense. But it shows you with that story of the pitcher, and with the way Gandhi drove his hardest bargains from in prison, it shows you that when they think they've got you under their control, you often have them under your control. In the next film that we're going to see on Tuesday, which talks about 4 nonviolent insurrections that took place in the 70s and 80s, one of the Philippine commentators, a priest, a bishop, I think, talks about the power of vulnerability. And I think that's a fairly good term for what we're hitting on here. Okay, anything else? That was a good observation, Matt. Anything else come up for us in this film? Nick?
I thought the competition you were talking about, I thought it was kind of the breaking thing on the mixed and violent in the sense that the violent nature of the past and that they have changed.
I think this is a very good point that Nick is raising, that the not nonviolent inmates in the prison and the staff, the prison guards who were, I think, not unionized yet at that time, they wanted, for the honor of that particular prison, for Danville, they wanted that guy out, and that maybe showed that they'd been affected. I think there's absolutely no doubt that we hear it from the warden when he has that moment, and he tests his will against the prisoner, and he fails, he loses, and he collapses, and he says, I can't wait to be dealing with murderers again, and I know how to deal with those guys. Sorry, I'm sort of rambling, but in the Ruhrkampf in 1920, no, that's wrong, 24, I think it was.